It hurts to admit, but there are wounds that not even time can heal, only courage can. Imagine spending decades believing you were doing the right thing, believing that love meant giving, sacrificing, swallowing tears and carrying on. Until one day, at your own son's doorstep, after years of sacrifice and renunciation, you hear the words, "I think you're at the wrong house." In that frozen instant, in the middle of Christmas, something inside me shattered. It wasn't just my heart, it was the entire illusion crumbling down. This is not only a story about rejection. It is about waking up from a trance disguised as affection, about finally seeing the abuse hidden beneath the mask of family duty, and most importantly, about deciding that enough is enough. It is an invitation for those who have given too much, for those who lost themselves trying to be enough, for those who always feel one step away from acceptance. If you have ever loved someone more than yourself and paid a high price for it, this story will strike you at the core. But take a breath. This story does not end in pain. Quite the opposite. What begins in abandonment transforms into empowerment. What looks like defeat becomes a rebirth. What seemed like the end was actually the very first step toward freedom. Prepare yourself, you are going to feel anger, compassion, relief and maybe even inspiration to write your own turning point. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we talk about truths that set you free, stories that hurt but also teach. From an early age, she was taught that a mother's love was sacred, unconditional, unbreakable. Donna believed in that with an almost religious faith. She spent years swallowing small humiliations, invisible wounds, and a constant feeling that love, in practice, was more obligation than affection. Love became duty. Duty became routine. And routine turned into a burden she carried with a smile on her face and an exhausted heart. No one ever said thank you, but every hand was always outstretched. And she gave. She gave because she was a mother. And mothers don't say no, right? Wrong. But that mistake, she hadn't seen yet. What they called unconditional love was, in truth, a silent system of emotional manipulation. The oldest son needed money to open a business. The youngest needed money to pay off debts. The daughter needed help to cover rent. Donna helped. She cut back on groceries, split up her health insurance payments, cancelled trips. There was always a convincing excuse on the other side: "It's just this month, I promise it's the last time." And love, poor love, was used as a shield to justify every sacrifice. When she began to suspect something was wrong, her own maternal instinct betrayed her. She felt guilty for doubting, guilty for thinking poorly of her own children. It was as if loving meant accepting being used with a smile. This kind of abuse is subtle. It doesn't slam doors, it doesn't leave bruises. But it corrodes. It corrodes self-esteem, self-worth, identity. Donna started seeing herself as nothing more than an extension of everyone else's needs. Her presence was useful, but never essential. She was the problem solver, the one who fixed everything. But what happened when she needed someone? The silence was deafening. Unconditional love only flowed in one direction. The moment she hesitated, even slightly, the judgmental looks appeared. How dare she think of not helping? She was a mother, after all. And a real mother never measures her effort, even if it means abandoning herself. The cruelest part was that all of this came wrapped in sweet words. "We love you, Mom," they'd say at the end of every bank transfer. Love became a receipt. The thank you was automatic, without eye contact, without listening to her pain. Donna began to notice her birthdays slipped by unnoticed, but the requests for money never failed. Her love was expected. The return? A vague memory, when they had the time. With every year, the loneliness grew louder, but she insisted to herself, "They're just busy. Life is hectic." And so she kept postponing the confrontation she already knew was inevitable. The most perverse trick of emotional manipulation is how it disguises itself as care. "You're the only one I trust," they'd tell her. But was it really trust or just convenience? When Donna finally decided to stop pretending she didn't see, fear came rushing in. Fear of losing the little she still had, her children nearby, even if only through bills and obligations. But even that was a lie. They weren't close. They were close to her wallet. Their presence was interest dressed up as affection. And unconditional love? Just a pretty label for an imbalanced relationship where only one side kept losing and never even realized it. The truth started to settle in when she realized her phone only rang when someone needed something. That her messages went unanswered, but the moment she mentioned money, replies came instantly. It was as if she wasn't a person, but a service. A resource. A bank with a heart. That hurt more than any debt. Because deep inside, a question began to rise, one she was terrified to answer. What if this isn't love at all? What if I've spent my whole life confusing affection with emotional dependency? That thought was the first step toward awakening. And from there, everything began to change. That was the moment she began to look at herself through different eyes. To realize that real love doesn't demand endless sacrifice. That reciprocity is not a favorite, is the foundation. That family is not an excuse for emotional abuse. And that being a mother does not mean becoming a martyr. The feeling was strange, almost like betraying something sacred. But for the very first time, she also felt a spark of empowerment. It wasn't selfishness, it was survival. And when it comes to one's own emotional health, the cut is not optional, it is necessary. That was when she started to plan something unthinkable. It wasn't revenge. It was liberation. She didn't want her children to suffer. She just wanted to stop suffering alone. When Donna finally understood that the unconditional love she offered had been used as a shield for exploitation, a part of her died. But another part was born. A part that longed for a fresh start. A part that craved autonomy. A part that finally understood that love must also have boundaries. And without boundaries, there is no respect. It was time to stop giving until her last breath. It was time to start living for her, with her, and through her. And her journey was only just beginning. It happened on Christmas. A date that once meant warmth, a crowded table, bursts of laughter, the smell of food filling the air. Donna left her house more carefully dressed than usual, with a basket of fruit in her hand and hope in her chest. She had decided not to warn them, she wanted to surprise them. Deep down, perhaps, she still hoped for a tight hug, a joyful "we're so glad you came, Mom." Instead, she found something else, a half-open door, muffled voices inside, quick footsteps and silence. When they finally laid eyes on her, the words came out cold, without hesitation, "I think you're at the wrong house." And it was as if the ground split open beneath her feet. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a cut. One of those cuts that doesn't bleed on the outside but leaves the soul raw and exposed. Her son looked at her as though she were some inconvenient neighbor, not the woman who had given up everything for him. Donna froze. She tried to smile, to understand, to search his eyes for some crack, some memory, any sign of affection. But all she found was a wall. Tall, thick, indestructible. She muttered something she couldn't even remember what. All she knew was that she turned around, still holding the basket, and walked down the steps without making a sound. The entire city seemed to be celebrating, except her. That night, for the first time, Donna felt invisible. She returned home and didn't even turn the lights on. She sat on the couch with her coat still on her shoulders and the bag still on her lap. The fruit seemed to mock her. That shiny red apple, the panettone she had bought because he loves this flavor. Everything turned into a symbol of a love she had believed existed and maybe never had. It was in that cold, dark silence that the truth finally sank in. She wasn't welcome. She wasn't expected. She wasn't remembered. What hurt the most wasn't her son's coldness, but the realization that she had been discarded without ceremony. In the days that followed, no one called. No explanations. No apologies. As if nothing had happened. Donna kept questioning herself, had she overreacted, misunderstood, been too sensitive? But deep down, she knew the truth. There was no misunderstanding. There was rejection. A brutal rejection. The kind that forces you to rethink an entire lifetime of choices. That Christmas scene became a dividing line. It was the end of an era. The moment when she stopped being mom and became merely that woman who shows up too much. Remembering that day still brought a knot to her chest. But it was also the beginning of her awakening. Pain, as cruel as it is, has the power to open your eyes. That was when she started to understand that love without reciprocity is only dependency. That a bond without respect is nothing but a prison. And that being invisible to the people you love can, paradoxically, be the very beginning of a new vision, the vision of yourself. For the first time, Dana asked herself, what if I deserve more? That question, simple as it was, ignited a flame that had been extinguished for far too long. It was time to rebuild. But before that, she had to accept the truth: she had been emotionally abandoned. And that abandonment began long before that Christmas door slammed in her face. It had come in monthly installments of indifference. In years of emotional absence disguised as life is just too busy. What happened that Christmas was just the breaking point, the symbolic cut that exposed what she could no longer deny. She had been useful but never seen. Present but never prioritized. It was time to change that. And that change began with one silent act of courage: finally seeing herself. In the days that followed, Donna allowed herself to cry. She cried a lot. But she also began to walk differently. Her back straighter. Her gaze steadier. It wasn't arrogance, it was reconstruction. She started writing in a notebook everything she felt. She wrote dates, sentences, memories. It was like sweeping out her soul. And there, between one line and the next, she began to rediscover traces of the woman who had been lost while trying so hard to be enough. The woman who said yes out of fear of being forgotten. The woman who offered everything, hoping for crumbs in return. That woman was exhausted. And ready, at last, to put herself first. That Christmas became a scar. But it also became a marker in time. Donna began to see more clearly all the small rejections she had normalized for years. And she finally understood that, for many, she was only relevant as long as she served a purpose. That truth stung. But strangely, it also freed her. Because now she knew those who cannot see your value don't deserve your effort. The pain of rejection doesn't vanish overnight. But it no longer ruled her. Donna had become invisible in the eyes of others, but at last, she was visible to herself. The routine had always been the same. On the 5th of the month, the transfer went through. Sometimes earlier, if the request came with urgency. Donna hardly realized how much money was leaving her account month after month. It was automatic. Like paying an emotional bill. The difference? No service provider ever called it family obligation. But she did. Because, somehow, someone had planted the belief in her mind that helping financially was proof of love. And that saying no would mean abandonment. The problem was, the money went out but love that never came back. Donna gave, and waited for her gesture to be noticed. For someone, at least, to ask if she needed anything. But no one ever did. Dependency had become the pattern. One son called when his card maxed out. The daughter when her rent was late. The other when his car payment was about to be overdue. They all had emergencies. They all had justifications. And Donna, on the other side, gave in. Even when her own account was tight, even when she cancelled her gym membership, even when she postponed doctor's appointments. Because a real mother sacrifices. But one day, she looked at herself in the mirror and asked, until when? Until when will I be nothing more than an ATM with a social security number? Until when will my love be measured by the amount of a bank transfer? She started paying attention. With every mom, I need something, there was an absence that pierced her heart. Nobody called just to ask how she was. Nobody asked if she needed company at a medical appointment, or if she simply wanted to talk. The equation was always one-sided. She had become what she had never wanted to be, the financier of other people's lives. But the cruelest part was realizing that, even so, there was no gratitude. Only more demands. Every time she gave, it seemed like a new obligation was born. An infinite debt, with no return, No limits, only the heavy interest of guilt. Donna kept all the receipts. Out of habit, out of caution, maybe out of memory. One day, she decided to organize them into a folder. When she added everything up, she froze. The amount was enough to buy a new car, a small house, an entirely different life. She felt anger, sadness, indignation, but above all, shame. Shame for letting it go so far. Because deep down, she knew it wasn't just about money. It was about feeling valued. And realizing that, despite everything she had given, she remained invisible, used, and disposable. That was the breaking point. The drop that turned into a tidal wave. Slowly, she started to say no. At first softly, then more firmly. And she saw what she had never expected. Instead of understanding, she was met with silence. With coldness. With veiled pressure. With emotional blackmail. I thought I could count on you. You've always been there for us. Now, when we need you the most, poisoned phrases, disguised as affection. Love became a bill. And the bond, a form of blackmail. She realized that love had turned into a delicate but cruel system of manipulation. A love conditioned on the monthly bank transfer. Donna began to notice the details. When she sent money, she received heart emojis, affectionate voice notes, even an occasional "I love you." But whenever she refused, her phone went silent. The affection was transactional. And that hurt more than any debt. It was as if her worth were tied directly to her bank balance. A mother who didn't give was a mother who didn't matter. A mother who didn't send money simply vanished. That was when she finally understood her children's love had turned into an automatic debit. Programmed. Convenient. Stripped of emotion, stripped of reciprocity, stripped of truth. She was paying to be loved, and even then, she wasn't. She started to wonder how her life would have been if she had invested in herself instead. In a course, in trips, in moments of pleasure. Maybe in therapy. How many dreams had she postponed to fund the dreams of others? How many times had she traded freedom for sacrifice? How many times had she stopped living just to keep someone else comfortable? It was time to change. Donna no longer wanted to be a martyr. She no longer wanted to be the family's emotional wallet. She wanted to be a woman. With desires, with choices, with plans. For the first time, she wanted to choose herself. But the process was painful. Because saying no after years of saying yes is terrifying. Because breaking patterns requires more strength than maintaining chaos. Yet there, between tears and doubts, Donna discovered something precious: she owed no one anything. Real love doesn't come with monthly bills. And if a bond only survives through money, then it is not love, it is dependency. And dependency is a prison. At last, Donna was beginning to see clearly. It was time to cut the ties. It didn't happen overnight. It took weeks of reflection, sleepless nights, pages of her diary filled with anger, fear, guilt, but also courage. Donna knew her decision would have consequences. She knew that breaking a cycle built over years would not pass unnoticed. She feared solitude, but more than that, she began to fear the emptiness of continuing to be used. Until the day came she cancelled all her scheduled transfers. Every automatic payment that had become part of her role as mother was stopped. Her heart trembled, but her hand was firm. For the first time in years, she had chosen herself. That day, her phone remained silent. As if the world somehow sensed that something had changed. It felt strange not to receive messages. Strange, but liberating. Of course, she felt fear. But alongside the fear came relief. She knew the breaking point would arrive. And it did. The very next day, the first message came through. Mom, did the money go through? Must have been a bank error. No, it wasn't an error. It was a choice. A cut. She took a deep breath and replied with just one sentence: it didn't go through, and it won't. A heavy silence followed. And it wasn't only on the phone, it was in the hearts of those who had always expected her submission. The reaction was immediate. Shock. Anger. Demands. What do you mean you stopped helping us? You know we need you. It's only until next month. But Donna had heard all those lines before. She had given in too many times. And this time, something was different. She didn't feel guilty. She felt firm. She was done being the foundation of a house that never sheltered her. She decided that sacrifice would no longer be the language of her love. That refusing to send money was not abandonment, it was setting a boundary. And without boundaries, she knew, there would never be respect. Curiously, not a single one of them asked how she was. No one wondered if she had a problem of her own. No one offered help or even the smallest gesture of concern. The focus was only on the money. That absence of empathy confirmed the truth she had always feared: she wasn't truly loved, she was useful. And once her function was gone, the mask fell. Her daughter sent a string of teary voice notes, claiming she felt betrayed, as if Donna's refusal were an act of cruelty rather than a desperate act of self-preservation. But Donna didn't give in. Yes, she was hurt. Deeply hurt. But she was also more determined than ever. This wasn't selfishness. It was self-care. A quiet, powerful kind of empowerment. The cut revealed everything. It exposed the absence of real bonds, the fragility of the connections, the hypocrisy behind all those sweet words. Without money, the children drifted away. None of them offered help, companionship, or even conversation. Donna understood then that conditional love does not survive a break. And the most painful part? They didn't even ask if she was all right. They only asked about the amount. That pierced her heart. But strangely, it also freed her. Because finally, the illusion dissolved. And in its place, a new woman was born. One who was sharper, stronger, and far more aware of what she would allow and what she would never allow again. The silence from her children became, at the same time, mourning and liberation. Donna cried, of course she cried. But this time, she cried for herself, not for them. She cried for the years lost, for the birthdays forgotten, for the nights spent awake worrying about people who never truly worried about her. And after she cried, she slept. And she slept well. For the first time in years, her chest wasn't heavy. The cut had not only been financial, it had been emotional, symbolic. A dividing line. Because when someone chooses to sacrifice themselves endlessly, eventually they drown. And Donna had decided to swim. Away from the pain. Toward herself. With time, she realized something: no one reached out unless they wanted something. And instead of breaking her heart, that brought clarity. The people who truly love you care even when you have nothing to offer. The ones who love with conditions vanish at the first no. And so Donna understood that the cut was actually a gift. A radical act of self-love. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Empowerment. Autonomy. Because sometimes, to save your soul, you must cut away everything that drains your peace. And so, Donna took her very first step into a new cycle. A cycle where she became the center of her own life. Where her choices came from desire, not obligation. Where helping others would be a choice, not the price of being accepted. The cut she had dreaded for so long became her rebirth. And she didn't yet know it, but this gesture would only be the beginning of an even deeper transformation. Because after breaking the cycle, she would discover something even more powerful: silence. At first, the silence felt strange. Donna would wake up and instinctively reach for her phone, expecting a notification. Nothing. No messages. No requests. No calls for help. What once would have felt suffocating slowly began to turn into relief. Silence, once synonymous with abandonment, now carried a new name: peace. For the first time in decades, she had breakfast without rushing, without guilt, without the weight of other people's worries pressing down on her shoulders. The house felt bigger. Her mind too. Suddenly, the world no longer revolved around everyone else's emergencies. She began to sleep better. Her dreams shifted. No longer were they haunted by overdue bills, family arguments, or emotional blackmail. Her mind, once noisy and restless, grew calm. And with that calm came something Donna hadn't felt in years: joy in the little things. She planted basil on her balcony. She went back to listening to her favorite songs. She reread an old book and cried at passages she had overlooked before. The silence was not emptiness. It was space. Space to be, to feel, to heal. And most importantly, to relearn how to live alone and to be at peace with that. Over time, she noticed something curious: the absence of emotional noise revealed just how much she had been suffocating. The constant need to fix everyone else's life had been a distraction. An anesthetic that kept her from facing her own pain. Now, with no one screaming for her help, she could finally hear her own inner cries. And for the first time, she chose not to ignore them. She began to write about what she felt. Her diary became her confidant. There, she allowed herself to be vulnerable. To admit she was scared, that she was hurt, that she was even angry. But also to confess her desires, her dreams, her long-forgotten wishes that finally deserved to see daylight. Loneliness, which once had been her greatest fear, became her ally. It wasn't about isolating herself from the world, it was about finding herself within it. No longer needing the constant validation of ungrateful children. No longer carrying the crushing weight of being needed all the time. Donna started to listen to herself more. To respect her limits. To say no calmly, and to say yes with awareness. The silence showed her she wasn't selfish, she was simply exhausted. And exhaustion is not a flaw. It is a sign that something is broken. Something she finally had the courage to repair. The memories still came back. Sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes at the grocery store. Flashes of forgotten birthdays, cruel words, indifferent glances. But now, she didn't swallow those memories anymore. She processed them. She felt the pain, took a deep breath, and let them go. Silence helped her do that. Without interference, without interruptions, she was learning to listen to her own heart. And her heart whispered something new: you are not alone. You are with yourself. And for someone who had spent a lifetime living for others, that realization was revolutionary. She also began to notice that silence unsettled those who once controlled her. When her children realized their messages no longer had power, that their dramatic voice notes were ignored, something shifted. The attempts at manipulation lost their grip. Because once someone finds peace in silence, they no longer fear the noise of blackmail. Donna had become shielded. Not by pride, but by self-love. And that kind of armor cannot be taken away. It is built brick by brick with awareness. And once awareness awakens, it never falls back asleep. The most beautiful part was that she didn't need to raise her voice to make herself heard. She didn't need to fight or dramatize. It was in her silence that she revealed who she had become. And it was in that same silence that new experiences began to find their way to her. New people appeared, people who valued her for who she was, not for what she could provide. Relationships free of demands, free of emotional games. Just presence. And for someone who had been used for so long, it felt like breathing fresh air after years trapped in a polluted room. Silence became her ritual. Her healing. Her way of life. And there, within that silence, a question was born that would change everything. What if I could be happy away from all of this? It was the first time Donna considered leaving. Starting over far away, on her own, and in peace. The idea sounded crazy, but it also felt liberating. Maybe the cut had only been the first step. Maybe now it was time for the leap. And so, listening only to the sound of her own heart, she decided it was time to go. It took a week. After the cut and the silence, her children vanished. No calls, no messages. But Donna knew they were waiting for her to cave. Waiting for her to chase after them, the way she always had. When that didn't happen, panic began to set in on the other side. First came the concerned messages: are you okay? Did something happen? They sounded caring, but Donna could smell the desperation behind them. And deep down, she knew it wasn't worry for her. It was fear of losing the monthly benefit. Those who have always received without effort find it offensive when the source runs dry. The messages multiplied. Then came the calls. Long voice notes, dripping with forced emotion. "Mom, we miss you. Everyone's asking about you." But Donna knew the truth. Nobody asked about her when she was sick. Nobody showed up for her last birthday. The missing her only began once the money disappeared. With each attempt to pull her back in, the mask slipped further. And though it hurt, it also confirmed what she had always suspected. They grieved the loss of her money more than the loss of their mother. Her value to them had been reduced to a transaction. And Donna had decided she would no longer be worth only that. The messages increased. They turned into calls. Long voice notes, overflowing with forced emotion. "Mom, we miss you. Everyone is asking about you." But she knew the truth. No one asked when she was sick. No one showed up for her last birthday. The missing her only appeared after the money was gone. The mask was falling with every attempt at reconnection. And although it hurt, it also confirmed what she already knew: the ones who lost the money felt it more than the ones who lost their mother. Her value to them was financial. And she was determined not to be worth only that anymore. The hardest part was watching her children try to turn the tables. One of them wrote, "You're pulling away from us. You'll regret it." Another sent, "You're throwing everything away." Donna took a deep breath. She read it all. She didn't reply. Because she had learned those who try to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself don't love you, they control you. The attempt at manipulation was shameless. Now that the money wasn't coming, the tone had shifted. From pleading to accusation. From affection to veiled threat. As if love were a contract and she was breaking the clauses. Donna almost gave in. Almost. Because a mother's heart is soft. But she had learned to listen to another voice, now the voice of reason. And reason told her there was no real affection in those messages. There was desperation, yes. There was dependency. But not love. If there had been, it would have shown up earlier. It would have existed in the lonely birthdays, the ignored messages, the nights she cried alone. What they wanted now wasn't their mother, it was the source. The structure. The comfort. But their comfort had always meant her sacrifice. And that no longer made sense. With each new attempt at contact, she felt less fear. She grew stronger. She realized she didn't need to respond. She didn't owe explanations. And, most importantly, she wasn't responsible for the emotional or financial lives of adults who treated her like an emotional ATM. It was strange to be sought out only when something was missing. But now, she recognized the pattern. And recognition is the first step toward freedom. The pain of rejection still lingered, of course. But it no longer had power. Because now she understood it wasn't personal. It was interest. And interest is not love. That was when her daughter sent an unexpected message, "Don't you want to see your granddaughter anymore?" That hit hard. For a moment, Donna hesitated. But then she thought, to see my granddaughter as a bargaining chip? The blackmail was clear. Using the love of a grandmother to break her resolve. A low blow, but a classic one. And she no longer fell so easily. She replied firmly, "Yes, I want to see her." But not under blackmail. Silence on the other side. The emotional game was no longer working. Because now, the one in control of the narrative was her. The calls stopped. Silence came, the kind of tense silence that only happens when people realize they've lost power. Donna didn't despair. Quite the opposite. She knew that in that moment, she was winning an internal war. Because she didn't want to destroy her children, she wanted to rebuild herself. She didn't want to push them away, she wanted to establish a new foundation, one without abuse. But to do that, she had to break. Truly break. No halfway measures. No emotional loopholes. The pain was part of the process. But it hurt far less than her old submission. In time, she understood something powerful: those who truly love return, but they return transformed. And those who only wanted the benefit leave-in let them go. Because losing those who never really loved you is not a loss. It's liberation. Donna no longer cried for her children. She cried for herself. For the woman who spent years erasing herself. Now, it was time to live. Because those who survive the cut, the silence, and the panic are ready to fly. The ticket was bought in a quiet midnight hour. Donna had been looking at pictures of Asia for weeks, enchanted by the colors, the organized chaos, the sense of freedom every image carried. Bangkok looked like another galaxy, motorcycles weaving through streets without rules, floating markets, golden temples, skies painted with tuk-tuks and lanterns. She wanted to disappear, but not out of cowardice. Out of choice. Out of freedom. She wanted to prove to herself that she could still reinvent at 58. She wanted to live somewhere no one called her mother, where she wasn't a function, a burden, or a provider. Just a woman. Landing alone was the first challenge. The language was different, the smells, the sounds, everything new. But Donna felt alive. She was far from her routine, far from the past. She walked through the streets of Bangkok with wide eyes and a light heart. It was as if every corner washed a piece of her soul clean. Within days, she already knew how to order street food with just a smile and a gesture. She tasted tamarind juice, spicy curry, jasmine rice. She bought a loose, colorful dress she would never have dared to wear before. In that vibrant city, she was relearning what it meant to feel joy. The most curious part was realizing that no one there labeled her. She wasn't the sacrificed mother, nor the broken provider. She was just Donna. And that was liberating. In small cafes, she wrote in her diary. In parks, she read books she had always postponed. She met a Canadian woman who had been traveling for years and heard from her a phrase that kept echoing: "We get used to less, when the less is truly ours." And that was exactly what she felt. She had fewer people, fewer demands, less noise. But she had more peace, more autonomy, more authenticity. She befriended a monk in a Buddhist temple. A serene old man who told her, in broken English, attachment is the root of suffering. Donna smiled. She understood instantly. She spent the morning in the temple, in silence, just observing. She left with a peace she had never known. It was as if her soul finally had room to breathe. Each day was a discovery. An awakening. A restart with no script, only instinct. And for the first time, she was allowing herself to be guided by it. Walking along Khao San Road, among backpackers, impromptu tattoos and live music, she found herself dancing alone. Laughing. Feeling her body, the music, the moment. There was no one watching. And even if there were, she wouldn't have cared. Because right there, in that instant, Donna realized she was free. Free from fear. Free from guilt. Free from the need to prove anything. Every step she took belonged to her. Every choice, too. It wasn't an escape. It was a return. A return to the woman who had always existed, but had been buried beneath years of duty. Mornings in Bangkok became sacred. She walked to the market, bought exotic fruits, exchanged smiles with local vendors. Then she sipped tea in a small cafe, wrote in her journal, and planned her next destinations. There was no rush. There didn't need to be. For the first time, life wasn't urgency. It was choice. It was her own rhythm. One morning she woke up wanting to go to Chiang Mai. Another day, she thought of crossing into Vietnam. And she realized she no longer needed permission. Or excuses. Only courage. The most beautiful part of it all was feeling her body respond. Her skin more alive, her eyes more alert, her posture lighter. Time seemed to move backward. Not because the wrinkles had vanished, they were still there, but because of the glow. The movement. The energy. Donna began wearing makeup again, not to impress, but because she loved the ritual. She started wearing colorful jewelry, floral scarves, big earrings. The aesthetics were only a reflection of what was inside. And within her now lived a woman who no longer allowed herself to be diminished. Who no longer apologized for existing. who, finally, occupied space. Bangkok was only the beginning. But it was there that everything turned. It was there that she understood no one will hand you freedom. You have to take it. And to do that, sometimes you have to leave. Far away. To remember who you are. To reprogram yourself away from the voices that tried to shrink you. Donna didn't know where she would be the next month, and that was the best part. Because for the first time, the future was a promise, not a prison. The first signs were subtle. Messages with a worried tone, sad emojis, little phrases like "just wanted to know if you're okay" began to appear between silences. Donna, with a clearer mind now, could see the subtext. It wasn't real concern. It was a new attempt at control, now dressed up as care. An emotional game in the clothes of affection. But the plot was old. If she didn't cave, guilt would come wrapped in love. And it did. "I'm pregnant, Mom. And I need you," said her daughter in a tearful voice note. But Donna already knew those tears weren't about affection, they were about gain. At another moment, the eldest son appeared with a dry message: "I've got high blood pressure. But you disappeared. Do you think that's fair?" The appeal to health. A classic. Using one's own vulnerability as bait to pull back the mother they felt slipping away. But Donna no longer bit the hook. She cared, of course she did. She always had. But she noticed the pattern was always the same. There was concern only when her no was firm. When she said yes, nobody got sick. Nobody cried. Nobody reached out. Love, once again, was being used as currency. Not responding was difficult. Hearing her daughter use pregnancy as emotional blackmail broke her heart. But she had to remember, if she gave in, the old cycle would return. And she no longer wanted to live in the prison of fear. Fear of losing the bond, the title of mother, the conditional love. So she took a deep breath. She wrote a short, firm response: "I wish you and the baby health. I'm here within what's healthy for me too." That was it. No sharp cut, no guilt, no loophole for manipulation. A clear boundary. A no that didn't shout but echoed. Over time, her children began to realize she was no longer the same. And as every crumbling structure does, they tried to reinforce the walls. They sent more voice notes, tried to involve mutual friends, relatives. A cousin sent her a message: "You need to forgive. They're your children." Donna answered with elegance: "Forgiveness isn't going back to what made me sick." And in that simple reply, she summed everything up. It wasn't about resentment. It was about protection. About respect. About self-love kind that had never been cultivated before. It was during this stage that she understood the weight of silent empowerment. She didn't need to justify every decision. She didn't need to explain her boundaries. The woman she had become no longer traded dignity for affection. It wasn't coldness, it was maturity. And maturity, that's what unsettles those who always thrived on your fragility. Every new attempt at concern, poorly disguised as care, was now read with clarity. It was as if she had learned a new language, the language of self-love. But that didn't mean her heart was made of stone. There were moments when she cried. When she looked at old photos. When she remembered the dreams she once had for her children's adult lives. When she imagined a family that perhaps had never really existed. But after crying, she reminded herself she had done what she could. She had given what she had. And now she was giving herself the chance to live a different story. Her tears now were purification, not submission. Donna understood that emotional manipulation, no matter how sweet it sounds, is still abuse. That an "I'm worried" wrapped in pressure is not love, it's strategy. And only those who doubt themselves can be manipulated. She no longer doubted herself. She knew her worth. She knew what she deserved. And above all, she knew where she would never return. Bangkok had shown her a world where she was free. And freedom, once tasted, can never be forgotten. Not even for blood ties. And so, she continued. Not broken. But redefined. She was still a mother, yes. But no longer a hostage. Now, The love she offered came with something it never had before: boundaries. And only those who truly love respect them. The rest was noise. And noise, she had learned to leave behind. The request came bluntly: "Mom, can I stay at your apartment for a few days? I'm leaving home." Donna read it and took a deep breath. Her daughter, pregnant, was facing the beginning of a marital crisis. For a second, the old instinct almost took over, the instinct that said, "Of course, come whenever you want." But the new Donna already knew kindness without limits becomes a trap. She thought, reflected, and replied firmly, "Yes, you can. The apartment will be available for 15 days. After that, I'll need you to get organized." It was an act of care, but with a deadline. With rules. With self-preservation. The daughter accepted. Half embarrassed, half surprised. It was the first time she had received a yes with limits. Donna didn't give in to guilt. She prepared the space with love: clean towels, fruit in the fridge, and a note on the refrigerator with the Wi-Fi password. All done with affection. But not with submission. There was no space left for the old pattern. She wanted to help, yes, but not erase herself. And that was one of her greatest victories: being kind without being a hostage. Loving without abandoning herself. The gesture of care now came with consciousness: I can help, but within my limit. During those 15 days, she kept things light. Cordial conversations, no intrusions. Donna observed. She analyzed the dynamics. But more than anything, she observed herself. She no longer let herself be carried away by guilt or fear. If her daughter pouted, she didn't collapse. If she tried emotional blackmail, she didn't react. She stayed centered. Kindness with boundaries is firmness with tenderness. And for someone who had spent her life saying yes just to be accepted, that was revolutionary. Of course there were tensions. The daughter complained about the lack of time, the lack of affection, the distance. Donna listened to it all with serenity. And she replied with a sentence that carried decades of learning: "The distance you feel is the space I need not to lose myself again." It struck hard. But it was true. She could no longer allow closeness to become invasion. She no longer wanted to live in the all-or-nothing mode. The new mode was: this far I can go. From here on, it's up to you. And that was when she realized something powerful: a boundary, well placed, doesn't push people away, it teaches. It reshapes. The daughter began to notice that even without the old pattern of unconditional help, there was still love. But a different love. A love with structure. With maturity. With responsibility. Donna was slowly rewriting the relationship. She no longer wanted to be rescued. Nor the rescuer. She wanted to be a partner. And that required clear boundaries: not to push away, but to bring closer with respect. The hardest part was holding back the impulse to fall back into old patterns. When she saw her daughter sad, alone, vulnerable, her heart ached. But she reminded herself every time she had crossed her own boundaries, she had lost a piece of herself. And now, every piece she had reclaimed was sacred. It could not be given away again on impulse. Kindness, yes. Self-abandonment, never again. The difference was there in the balance. In the no that came with empathy. In the yes that came with a deadline. In the love that came with structure. At the end of the 15 days, her daughter said thank you. A real thank you. For the first time in a long time, Donna heard a thank you that felt sincere. Without demands, without resentment, without hidden meanings. And that moved her. Maybe that gesture with boundaries had planted a new seed. Maybe her daughter was beginning to understand that her mother's love had not disappeared, it had simply matured. And what once was confusion was now clarity. And clarity is a gift worth more than any help. Donna closed the door that day with a gentle smile. Not of relief but of peace. She had done what she could. With love, with balance, with consciousness. And now, she could continue her path knowing that her heart remained open but her boundaries, intact. The notification arrived quietly, almost unnoticed. A short video from her daughter, her granddaughter crawling, then standing up, taking her very first steps. She walked today. Wanted to show you. Donna stared at the screen for long minutes. Her heart raced. It was a simple image but loaded with meaning. For a moment, she thought of replying with enthusiasm, the way she always would have. But something held her back. She knew that this was an opening, yes, but one that had to be handled carefully. It wasn't time to throw open every door again. It was time to observe, to feel and to choose with awareness. Her response was short, sweet, and measured beautiful. Such a special moment. Thank you for sharing. No excess, no return to old patterns. Just presence. The daughter didn't reply. But Donna knew something was shifting. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a crack. A ray of light slipping through the fractures of a wall built over years with demands, resentment, and distance. And for the first time, she didn't rush to climb that wall. She waited. With patience. With maturity. With a love that was now firm, not desperate. In the days that followed, more messages arrived. A drawing from her granddaughter. A photo at the playground. A silly sticker with a good morning. Donna responded with warmth, but without haste. Every word was chosen. Every reply measured. Not out of coldness, but out of wisdom. She no longer wanted relationships built on urgency or need. She wanted bonds built with time, respect, and truth. And now, she could see maybe, just maybe, her daughter was beginning to understand that too. Communication was slowly becoming more humanless, strategic. It was hard not to get carried away. Donna felt longing. She wanted to see her granddaughter, hug her daughter, laugh about silly things in the kitchen. But she knew longing is not an excuse to lose herself again. The desire for reconnection was there, yes, but only if it came through healthy paths. And the most surprising thing was realizing that she, Donna, had become someone capable of waiting. Without despair. Without begging for attention. Her patience was the fruit of all the empowerment she had built over the last months. It was proof that, at last, she had learned to love herself. In the past, she would have sent tickets, made invitations, bought gifts. Today, she waited for real signs. Genuine presence. And when it didn't come, she carried on with her life lightly. Because she understood forced reconciliation is only repetition. And repetition without healing is relapse. She didn't want to fall. She wanted to rise. To evolve. To grow. And if her children wanted to be part of that, wonderful. But never again at the cost of her autonomy. That, now, was non-negotiable. The most beautiful thing was realizing that this new way of loving was teaching more than any lecture could. Her daughter began to ask small questions. Are you doing well over there? What did you eat today? Little gestures, but ones that came without demand. And that was rare. Donna welcomed these attempts with an open heart, but kept her feet on the ground. She knew there was still much to heal. But one thing was certain: she would no longer close herself off. She would simply not give herself away completely out of need. The crack was there, but the wall was still necessary. Some people would see this posture as cold. But Donna knew it was the opposite. It was pure love. Clean love, without bitterness, without games, without debt. A love that doesn't suffocate, but offers space. And that space, paradoxically, was what was finally beginning to bring them closer. Because those who are free choose to be together. And when being together is a choice, it becomes connection, not obligation. This was the new path. Slower, more real, lighter. And so, the crack remained open. Without hurry. Without expectation. Like someone planting a seed but not forcing the sprout to emerge. Donna knew what is true blooms at the right time. And she had finally learned to respect that time, including her own. Her backpack was light, but her heart even lighter. Donna left Southeast Asia for a journey with no fixed script: Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan, New Zealand. Each country was a piece of her soul reclaimed. In Vietnam, she was moved by the harmonious chaos of Hanoi and the magical silence of Ha Long Bay. In Malaysia, she learned that spirituality and spicy food can heal more than much therapy. In Japan, she saw beauty in silence and felt understood for the first time in a long time. And in New Zealand, driving alone along roads surrounded by mountains, she understood the world was vast and she finally belonged in it. Each country erased a little of the old pain and wrote a new chapter of herself. She slept in hostels, drank tea with strangers, filled journals, and posted reflections that touched other women. Without meaning to, she became a reference, an inspiration. And it wasn't ego. It was justice. Justice for the years when she was invisible. Now, she was presence. She was decision. She was choice. The woman who had once been the emotional bank of a broken family was now a source of light, first for herself, then for the world. And most importantly, she would never again go back to who she had been. Sitting in a cafe in Auckland, with a gentle breeze on her face and her notebook in her lap, Donna wrote, "My story will no longer be a tragedy written by others." It was simple, but profound. There lay the essence of everything. It wasn't about revenge, nor about pride. It was about awareness. For the first time, she didn't need to be anything other than herself. She had forgiven herself, released her children, let go of the pain. Now, every choice was her own. And freedom, she discovered, is not shouting independence, it is acting with clarity, loving with measure, and saying no with peace. She no longer wanted a stage, nor an audience. She wanted a small life, but one full of meaning. A granddaughter who would grow without being used as a weapon. A daughter who might return, but only if she came with love, not need. And a self-love that would never retreat again. Donna knew she wasn't perfect. But she was at last whole. And that wholeness was everything she had always sought. Her story was not about escape, it was about return. Return to her own voice, her own body, her right to say no without guilt and to exist without having to pay for it. What had begun as a financial cut revealed itself to be, in truth, a profound surgery of the soul. Decades of rejection, manipulation, silence, and sacrifice disguised as love. And beneath it all, there had always been a woman who simply wanted to be seen, respected, loved. Not for what she gave, but for who she was. And when that never happened, she had the courage to give herself that love. Watching Donna leave behind emotionally immature adult children, conditional transfers, and hollow embraces was not easy. But it was necessary. Because no transformation happens without pain. And she had learned how to turn pain into a road. Guilt into wisdom. Abandonment into freedom. Every destination traveled, every choice made, was a page turned, not to erase the past, but to write it more truthfully from here on. Life hadn't given her a manual, but she had learned to hold the pen firmly. And that changes everything. If you've come this far, you've felt every part of this journey. Maybe because you saw yourself in it. Maybe because you know someone like Donna. Maybe because, deep down, a part of you is also tired of giving until you bleed. And if that's the case, I invite you now, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Save this content. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep following stories that set you free, that provoke and that heal. Because yes, stories have that power. In the end, Donna didn't want to prove anything to anyone. She simply lived. And by living so courageously, she showed us that it is never too late to change course. That motherhood should not mean martyrdom. That love without respect is not love, it is prison. And that writing your own story, even if late, is still an act of justice. Not for others, but for yourself. Because deep down, we don't need a happy ending. We need an honest new beginning.